Hello and welcome to the show. Now today I am not trying to start a fan war. I'm honestly not. I don't want to see massive arguments over what's better, if Forza 4 is better than Gran Turismo or vice versa. That's not what this is about. I was actually kind of curious to see how lap times compared between the two games using the same cars and the same track. Now for each of these cars they were all given 10 laps of their respective tracks to try and get the fastest lap time I could out of them. Now admittedly this is not a perfect test because there are sort of two variables that I can't really control, and that is, well, if there is a discrepancy in lap times, if the track is slightly different length or if the cars are slightly different performance. I can't sort of single out which one of them it is. Like, it's only kind of a bit of a generic-y sort of thing. I can't do much more with that. There are a few variables I can control though. First of all, we are going to be using the same driver. I'm going to be driving for both of them. I may not get the ultimate lap time out of these cars, however it doesn't matter because it's going to be the same person driving them, so everything is fair. As I mentioned earlier, all the cars are given the same amount of sort of practice time when it comes to the driving. Now admittedly I have had much more experience on Forza than I have with Gran Turismo. However, for this test, again, to keep things fair, I'm using the same steering wheel on both games, and I don't like Forza with a steering wheel, so I'm hoping that's kind of going to even itself out. Yeah, admittedly I do have more experience, but I've had less experience with Forza on a steering wheel than I have with Gran Turismo, so I'm hoping things will be fair on that front. As far as assists go, I have taken all the assists off, bar the ABS on Gran Turismo. I have to have that on 1 because the brakes are so unbelievably sensitive on there when I'm running on the steering wheel, and it's so incredibly easy to lock up. And when you do lock up on Gran Turismo, it's always the rear wheels that lock up, so you go round in a circle. So yeah, I do have ABS on the minimum when it comes to Gran Turismo. Now, I've mentioned this before, I really do not like a steering wheel on Forza, and having done this experiment I can now hopefully properly explain why it doesn't really work for me anyway. This is the first lap I did with the Lotus Esprit. Now when it comes to racing on Forza, you got your nice steering wheel. You want the steering wheel to have a certain amount of weight to the steering. If you only ever raced with a very cheap steering wheel, if it's really light, if there's no resistance to you turning the wheel, it's incredibly hard to drive because you have to be so very delicate, and it's very easy to kind of over counter, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's very easy to make mistakes. You have to be so incredibly delicate if it's got no resistance. So with a decent wheel it will have some form of resistance, some form of force feedback. The Fanatic CSR that I'm using has all of that. However, when it comes to Forza, you're driving along, in this case in my Lotus, and as I come up towards the corner, you start turning into the corner and the steering wheel's got quite a lot of resistance, so you're having to put a fair bit of force into actually turning the wheel. The problem is, the minute the tyres break traction, the steering suddenly goes really light. And so you're turning left or you're turning right, you're holding it with however much force, and suddenly it doesn't require anywhere near as much force, so your hands are going to slip and you're going to end up steering even more than you were before. If you're driving a front-wheel drive car, that's not so much of a problem. If the tyres are losing traction, chances are you're going to be understeering. So if your hands slip and you give it more steering, it's not going to matter because it's going to be still going straight on. It's going to run out of grip. With a rear-wheel drive car, if that happens, you end up going far more sideways than you wanted to. And then if you try to counter it, then maybe the car will suddenly find grip. Like the resistance keeps changing how much is needed. So if you've lost all the resistance and it's really light, you're trying to kind of do little delicate movements to counter it, and then all of a sudden it will find grip, and then it will try and throw itself off. It's really an absolute nightmare to try and drive it. You can get used to it to an extent, but I really don't like it. I've used this steering wheel on Forza, on what games I used it on PC? Project Cars, iRacing. iRacing, I had issues getting it connected to my PC, that's another story. R Factor and all of that kind of thing, and it doesn't have this issue at all. Played on Formula 1, not had any issues with it doing that on there. It does that kind of thing on Gran Turismo, but when it loses resistance, it doesn't go anywhere near as light, so it's kind of a lot more manageable. Now another thing the steering wheel does, it does it on Gran Turismo as well. I'm currently not holding the steering wheel and it's doing that movement. I'm doing this on Forza just so I can show you the telemetry. What happens is if you steer left or you steer right and then you let go of the steering wheel, rather than going back to the middle like it should, it keeps going backwards and forwards, left and right. Basically the way the car, as you can see it's going here, the way it kind of generates resistance, I guess, is to turn the steering wheel in the opposite way to the way you're turning, and if you let go, it just gets confused. It is possible to spin your car out without touching the steering wheel at all. by doing that. I have done it before. I wasn't going fast enough there to do it, but yeah, you can spin the car out. It is, oh god, yeah, I'm not a fan of, of some of that thing. Steering wheel shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, onto the actual challenge proper. Now, as I said, I'm going to be using 3 cars, 3 different tracks. Each of them are given the same amount of time, same number of laps for me to get used to them. I am using these slower cars because of steering on Forza, pretty much. So up first, we have a Civic Type R, and we're going to be going around Tsukuba. There are only, I think, 4 tracks that cross over between Gran Turismo and Forza, and I'm using 3 of them. I didn't use Nürburgring because I don't like Nürburgring either, and I really don't want to fight cars on Forza around a track that I don't like. So yeah, we start with Tsukuba. I do quite like this track. It's a fairly short track, fairly easy track to learn. I also do really quite like this car. The Honda Civic, the Type R Civics anyway, are absolutely fantastic cars, and they get a lot of crap from people who don't really know what they're talking about, and they also get a bad name from the idiots who try to modify them very badly. I do like the Civic Type R. This is a great handling car, one of my favourite hot hatches of all time. Now there is some odd, I guess, ranking or categorising between the 2 games. On Gran Turismo, this Civic is not categorised very highly at all. It is down with Mitsubishi. I think it's the same as a Mitsubishi Colt, and it's only a couple of performance points different from a BMW 2002 Turbo. On Forza, this thing is a very high C class, while the Colt and BMWs are both D class. I'm not sure where they are. There's a big difference between these on Forza, whereas Gran Turismo categorises them as very similar. Not sure what's going on there, and not sure why the car is categorised so lowly on Gran Turismo. Now these are supposedly the same cars. I did have a look on the specifications on them between the 2 games. There is different numbers of horsepower. Now I am not entirely sure if it's to do with horsepower like at the flywheel and horsepower at the wheels. I'm not sure what game measures it in what. I thought Forza measured it at the wheels, hence why the Veyron has under 1,000 horsepower when it's measured in Forza. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I believe these cars are the same year, they're the same model as far as I can tell anyway. So I'm not sure what's going on with the horsepower differences. It's with all of the cars that are tested on here, the horsepowers are slightly different. So yeah, that confuses me a little bit. Anyway, while I've got this car out, it really is a fantastic car to drive. This one, I highly recommend it. Even if you're not a massive fan of Civics, just give this car a go and you will like it. It's such a nice car to drive. It's front-wheel drive. Normally front-wheel drive cars have problems with understeer. However, because this car it's only got 180 odd horsepower, you can just chuck it into corners. You don't have any problem with understeer. It really is a great car to drive. Also, I have not driven manual on Forza for a very long time. I drive manual with clutch, and the gear changes are so sluggish. On the change up it's alright, but it takes so long for the damn computer to change down a gear after you press the paddle. It really is ridiculous. It's so incredibly slow downshift. So I feel sorry for people who run with manual. It's incredibly difficult for me anyway. Now we move on to our next car. I'll put all the times at the end. I'm going to be using a Volvo as well. Why not? I was looking through the Forza, the Gran Turismo car dealership, so that I could actually find cars. I was looking for premium cars that I knew were on both games. So I'm using the C30 R design. It's another hatchback that I quite like. The looks won't. I think everybody will have different opinions on the looks. I quite like it because it tries things a little bit differently. There's lots of very samey super minis out there, and this tries something a little bit different. Some people won't like it. I can understand why, but I quite like it. It's actually not a bad car to drive either. Now, when it comes to the ranking system, again, things are a little bit weird. On Gran Turismo, it rates this car about 15-20 performance points higher than that of the Civic. When it comes to Forza, this one is about 20 PI lower than the Civic. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure how that one works. I think this car might have been a little over performanced or whatever categorized when it comes to Gran Turismo. It's a good car, don't get me wrong. As I said, I do quite like driving it. It's not as bad as I thought it might be. However, it's a little bit more powerful than the Civic, but I think it is quite a bit heavier. So I'm not quite sure why it gets categorized higher on Gran Turismo. Either way, I was getting it around Laguna Seca. Interestingly, I'm noticing when I'm watching this replay that I'm spinning the wheels a lot through the corners. I didn't realise I was doing that while I was racing. Yeah, I didn't realise I was getting so much wheel spin from this thing. It's very hard to tell when you're getting wheel spin, or at least I find it very hard to tell when I'm on a steering wheel. On a controller it's very easy because the thing vibrates to tell you you're spinning the wheels. On the steering wheel it has a habit of vibrating a lot of the time anyway, so sometimes it's hard to differentiate when it's just normal thing vibrating to give you some sense of feeling and when you're actually spinning the wheels. So yeah, I was surprised actually. There was a lot more wheel spin going on in that run than I expected. This track looks remarkably more hilly on Forza. I've only just noticed that. I swear that first bit looks more hilly when it comes to Forza. Oh well, I'm not here to sort of compare the graphics too much. I think Forza has probably got Gran Turismo beat when it comes to pure graphics, but that's not surprising as Forza was out quite a bit after Gran Turismo. When it comes to this car, it's a bit of an odd car in that the gear ratios are horrendously long, like really stupidly long on this thing. Around this entire course, as I run wide at the same points on both games, this car, I think I used 2 gears. I used second and third, and that was it. Just as it came to the end of the front kind of start-finish straight, it was about to be ready to change up into fourth, but I never needed to because I'd always be on the brakes before I hit the rev limiter. It's very odd when manufacturers do this with cars. The Skyline R33 is another one that we've driven. I think the Stig, when he did a lap of the Top Gear test track, it only ever used 2 gears as well. I don't get it. I really don't get why you'd have such horrendously long gears, because you're never going to use like the 5th and 6th gear. I mean, admittedly, yeah, these are kind of road cars. Well, sort of semi-road cars, semi-racing versions of road cars. So, you know, you use the higher gears for fuel economy and everything. But, yeah, the gear ratios on this thing are ridiculously long. You never, on any racetrack, I mean, sure, look, the straights here aren't the longest, but to not actually get out of 3rd gear, it really does hinder this car. With a better gearbox, I think this would be a fairly good competitor as a hot hatch. But with the gearbox as it is, it's so long accelerating that, yeah, is a little bit sluggish on that front. Still, not a bad car though. I do quite like it overall. We'll move on to our final test. I had to go for something rear-wheel drive, so I've gone for a Lotus Esprit. Another car which I quite like. I know most of these cars have been fairly slow, or slowish cars for video games anyway. As I explained, it's so that I actually stand a chance of controlling them when it comes to Forza, because I really don't like the wheel. Suzuka is not my favourite track in the world. Whenever I hear this like talked about when it comes to Formula 1 and stuff, everybody's saying, oh, how much the drivers love this track and everything. I'm not a massive fan of Suzuka. I don't know why. I don't know. The first section's kind of is all right. A little bit samey for me. I'm also terrible at Spoon. I don't know why. It's one of those corners. Everybody has a corner they can never ever get right, and Spoon is one of those corners for me. I can't do it. Every time I try, I just cannot get the damn corner right. It's probably that's why I'm not a massive fan of Suzuka. These next corners though that are coming up, I do like these corners. They are quite fun. If you get them right anyway, they're great corners. If you get them wrong, it's a massive pain. They are very tough corners, them too. Now, the Lotus, I've reviewed this car before, I think a long time ago, on Forza 4. It is a very good car to drive. I do like driving this car. It's kind of got that balance of straight line speed and handling. It's very heavy. I say heavy. It's very heavy for a Lotus, shall we say. I can't remember how much. I think it's £2,800, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure quite on the weight of the cars. Gran Turismo does things in kilograms, Forza does things in pounds, and I didn't bother converting it. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. I presume the statistics on the car are even. They're just measured slightly differently. I should have probably checked that one. But yeah, I do like the Lotus. The Lotus overall, it's a good balance between power and handling. It is a little bit slidey. And I was also interested to see how the cars compare sort of handling-wise on both games. It is remarkably close between all the cars. This Esprit in particular was very similar handling between Forza and Gran Turismo, the same amount of slidiness. You were taking similar gears through most of the corners, you were taking similar speeds through pretty much all of these. The final corner at Tsukuba, the very, very long sort of sweeper corner, I was a couple of miles an hour faster. I could be consistently a few miles an hour faster when it came to Forza. Around here, I wasn't actually able to check particularly. On this run here, this is the 10th lap with the Esprit, and I hadn't done particularly well up to this point. Now I was incredibly tense, trying to make sure I didn't screw up that lap. I had had a few issues with the Esprit. I don't know. I'm going to blame my lack of driving experience with that one. Yeah, I don't know. I was having issues. I mean, partly down to Suzuka as well. Me just not being particularly good here. When it came to Forza, again, I think this was on the final lap as well. It was very nerve-wracking knowing that you have to get this lap absolutely right. Again, I'm sliding the Esprit all over the place. Yeah, I do like this car. As I've said, I was getting a lot more sideways on Forza. I'm noticing now. Didn't realise that. Having a few issues in sliding this car around. Now, as far as rating system goes, with this car, it is very hard to track. Now, it seems to me that there's a little bit bigger gap between the Esprit and the rest of the cars on Forza than there is on Gran Turismo. However, I'm not entirely sure on the Gran Turismo rating system, as when we did what did we do? I've forgotten the name of the damn thing. For heaven's sake. Can't believe it. My mind has just completely drawn a blank. Shuffle race, that's what it was. When we did the shuffle racing, I think it was 500 performance points is the highest you can set it to, and a Celine turned up. There was a Celine in there, and I believe there was only like a 5-point kind of difference, so it could be 5 points over. And a Celine at 505 say performance points, and this Esprit is 480. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on the ranking system on Gran Turismo as of yet. This Celine, by the way, on Forza is an R3 car, and this thing is an A-class car. There's like 200, yeah, about 200 performance PI difference, which is quite a lot. So yeah, ranking systems, I don't know. It's very hard. I don't know how ranking is judged on either of the games. However, some of the cars on Gran Turismo do seem to be a little bit wonkily compared, shall we say. But as we come around the final few corners with the Esprit, I have managed to make it round a lap without sliding too much and without spinning and without falling off the road. I was very glad to see the finish line. Also, I forgot to point out, actually, the start-finish line is a different point on Suzuka, on Gran Turismo and Forza. On Gran Turismo, the start-finish line is much nearer the top of the straight, whereas on Forza it's kind of down the middle. Well, it shouldn't make any difference. He's still going around the same distance. It's just timed from a slightly different point. So, there we go. They were the three cars and the three tracks. All had fairly clean laps. I was fairly happy with all of them. Yeah, I could probably have gone a little bit faster with each of the cars, but it was within the given time. So, yeah, that will kind of do. As far as the lap times go, this is where things get interesting and confusing. The Civic was over 2 seconds faster on Forza 4. And I don't think I could. Well, I probably could get 2 seconds after much practice, but then I could get 2 seconds on Forza. Yeah, that's a massive discrepancy. I wasn't expecting to see that. The Volvo was a lot closer, and admittedly, it is a little bit faster on Forza. However, you know, that's not too bad. 0.4 of a second isn't a huge margin. As far as the Esprit goes, there's a second difference in it. It's a little bit down to driver possibly, but yeah, around Suzuka as well, it's a longer track, so there's more time you can be made up and lost. But again, I still think the Esprit is a little bit faster when it comes to Forza 4. Now, I was confused by these results, as some of the experimenting I'd been doing with cars, I was going a lot faster around Tsukuba in particular. I was doing very fast times with a modified Skyline. All those cars that you saw before were completely stock. And the reason why it confused me is when I ran the Skyline I think I had, I was going quicker than some of the highly modified cars we used for a challenge. We tried to set as fast a lap time as we could around Tsukuba without any restrictions on the car at all. So yeah, I was a little bit confused as to how the cars on Gran Turismo were going much faster. So I got in this, I think it's a 1,000 horsepower ACR Viper somebody sent me. Again, thank you to everybody who sends me cars. And I was going to give it a go and see what lap time I could get out of this. Get out of this thing around the Tsukuba track. Not my sort of car really. I tend not to race the really powerful cars. I much prefer to race lower PI or lower performance points, slower cars, because you get better racing with them. So I'm not hugely experienced with this sort of fast car. I love the Viper, but I don't tend to race this kind of fast car. At 1,000 horsepower in a Viper isn't unreasonable. We could have made a 1,000 horsepower Viper on Forza if we had wanted to use one of them. In that particular challenge, I chose not to, as I wanted to be able to put the power down in whatever car it was that I was using. Anyway, the lap times now get even more confusing, as the Viper does a lap time of a 51.080. That is incredibly fast compared to the Ultima, which I ran in Forza 4, that did a 54.0. That's a 3-second difference in what car. I won't say they were necessarily equal, but that Ultima is an R1 car, and the Viper is 3 seconds a lap quicker. Now that does confuse me. See, I was expecting the cars in Gran Turismo to be a little bit faster than the cars in Forza, but the standard ones aren't. So the conclusion I can draw from this is that A, I am confused. I believe when it comes to the upgrading stuff in Gran Turismo, I guess that makes the cars faster. Like maybe the tyres have something to play. I know you can choose different compounds of tyres and all that kind of thing. Maybe they play a bigger role when it comes to Gran Turismo. Maybe the performance gains you put on your car make the cars noticeably faster over the performance gains you get from upgrading cars in Forza. I'm not really sure quite what's going on with that. I mean, how can the Civic be 2 seconds a lap slower and two highly modified cars be that far a difference? I wouldn't expect a highly modified Viper on Forza to go much faster than that Ultima. Not really, and especially not after the same amount of time and everything. I think that's only like the 4th lap I did with the Viper as well. So yeah, as far as conclusions go to this one, with completely standard cars, it seems that they are quicker when it comes to Forza 4. However, when it comes to modified cars, dear God, they are faster on Gran Turismo. Also, Fanatic CSR I don't like on Forza. Ironically, the steering wheel built for Forza Motorsport 4, and I like it on every other game except for Forza. Maybe there's some blooming settings. I'll have to fight with that thing some more. I don't know. Anyway, that is it for today, guys. So thank you very much for watching. If you have challenges that you'd like to see us do, or stuff you would like to see us investigate, please do leave it in the comment section. I'll have a look through, and my favourites will be in a video at some point. However, until next time, goodbye.